Welcome back to MHS Midnight Horror Stories. I know that many of you come to these videos as a gentle way to unwind before drifting off to sleep. So, before you close your eyes tonight, could I ask you for one small favor? Just leave me a quick interaction, a comment, a like, or maybe share where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Little actions like that help YouTube recognize the content and spread it to more people who might enjoy it. My current goal is to reach around 300 likes within the first 24 hours. Now then, let's step into tonight's chilling stories together. My name is Daniel. I'm a health inspector in Chicago. Today, I received a file to inspect a fried chicken restaurant. This shop had a sudden increase in revenue over the past 6 months, but there were also many customer complaints about strange symptoms after eating, nausea, headaches, and an unusual craving. I pushed the door open and walked in. The space inside was crowded. The tables were all full. I walked to the counter, and a young female employee greeted me with a small smile. "Hi, can I help you?" she asked. "I'm a health inspector." "I need to see the manager," I said, showing my badge. She looked a little surprised, but then she cooperated. "Yes, sir." She went into the back. A moment later, a tall man came out. He was middle-aged, well-dressed, with a radiant smile like a professional salesman. The name tag on his shirt read, Maxwell-Manager. "Hello, Inspector. How can I help you?" he said. "Just a routine check." "I need to see the kitchen and the freezer." "Of course." "Follow me," he said. Maxwell led me past the counter and into the kitchen. The kitchen was spacious and clean, and there were only 2 employees working. They didn't look at me and just focused on their work in a robotic way. I did a quick check, and it was pretty clean, but when I looked closer, I noticed that the chicken in the deep fryer had a slightly different color. "Where do you get your chicken from?" "From a broiler farm." "We've had an exclusive contract for 2 years, Maxwell replied quickly. "Can I see the contract and the quality certificates?" I asked. "Of course. Let me get them for you," he said. Maxwell led me into a small office behind the kitchen. He opened every drawer but couldn't find anything. "I apologize. The documents are at the farm. We just had an audit last week, and we sent everything back," he said. I nodded, but I was a little suspicious. In my experience, stores always keep copies of important documents. "If you want, we can drive to the farm and take a look." "It's only about a 20-minute drive," he said. I hesitated for a moment, but my curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to go with him. "Okay, I'll go," I said. We drove to the outskirts of the city. Along the way, Maxwell told me about his family and his business. He talked naturally and was friendly. After a 20-minute drive, we turned onto a small dirt road. All around us were cornfields that had been harvested, and there were no other houses. The farm that Maxwell was talking about was at the end of the road, surrounded by a barbed wire fence. As soon as I got out of the car, I smelled a strong, foul odor. I scrunched up my face a little, and Maxwell quickly explained. "That's probably the smell of poultry manure," he said. Maxwell led me through the iron gate. Inside were long rows of coops. Strange noises were coming from the coops. "These chickens are a special breed. They grow faster and have more meat," Maxwell said. We arrived at the first coop. Maxwell unlocked the iron door. The things I saw in the coop could not be called chickens. They were huge. They didn't have feathers but had a wrinkled, pimply layer of skin. Their eyes were bloodshot. When they saw us, they became aggressive, screaming and rattling the bars, trying to bite through the gaps. I backed away. "What are you doing to them?" I asked. Maxwell closed the door and turned to me with a satisfied smile. "I created them. With growth hormones, genetic stimulants, and a little personal creativity. It took me 3 years to create the perfect product," he said. "You're feeding customers the meat of these things?" I asked. "And they love it," he said. Maxwell walked closer to me, his face full of pride. "Our store's revenue has tripled in 6 months. Do you know why?" "Because I've discovered the perfect business formula," he said. "You're insane," I said. Maxwell laughed. "I'm a genius." I'm going to expand this model nationwide, he said. I pulled out my phone, intending to call the police. Maxwell saw me and quickly grabbed my wrist. Wait, Daniel. Are you sure you want to do that? He said. He pulled out his own phone and turned on a live video. On the screen was my daughter, Maya, in her bedroom. My heart stopped. How did you? I always plan ahead, Daniel. I told you everything because I believed you would understand. We are both smart people and know how to cooperate. All you have to do is submit a report saying the restaurant is completely normal. That's it, he said. And if I refuse? I asked. Maxwell stared at me coldly. Then Maya will disappear. Forever. Or worse, she might become part of the product, he said. I clenched my hands, shaking with anger. I understand, I said. Smart. Now let's go back to the city, he said. On the way back, I stayed silent. I couldn't let Maya be in danger, but I also couldn't let hundreds of people continue to eat the meat of those toxic monsters. I got home late. Maya was still awake, waiting for me. I hugged her tightly, trying to suppress my heavy breathing. The very next morning, I decided to act. I sent Maya to my in-laws in Wisconsin. I had detailed evidence that I had secretly videotaped and photographed when I was at the farm that day. I sent the article with the evidence to the Chicago Tribune, CNN, and the FDA at the same time. Within 48 hours, the scandal exploded. The stores involved were immediately shut down. Maxwell was arrested for mass food poisoning. I felt relieved that justice had been served. I never thought I would stand in the middle of a city on fire. Not in a movie or on the news, but actually there, smelling the smoke and feeling the scorching heat on my face. My name is Ricky, and I'm 27. In early September 2025, I was on a slightly crazy motorcycle trip from Thailand back to England. I'm currently stuck in Kathmandu. I arrived the day before and immediately found myself in the middle of a protest. I booked a hotel room and will stay in Kathmandu until the curfew is over. That morning, I was riding my motorcycle through the streets when I heard a strange noise. It sounded like thousands of people all at once. Curious, I parked my bike and walked toward the commotion to see what was happening. The crowd had gathered in Durbar Square. I felt the heat from all the bodies packed around me. People held signs in both Nepali and English, with words like corruption and justice. The air was tense. Protesters chanted slogans, and some speakers gave speeches. I stood at the edge of the crowd, just watching. A middle-aged man next to me spoke fluent English and explained that they were protesting government corruption. But then things started to change when the riot police showed up. They wore gas masks and carried shiny black batons. Their presence was like a tiny spark dropped into a barrel of gunpowder. The first scream came from the front of the crowd. I couldn't see what was happening, but I felt a wave of panic spread through the rows of people. Then the first bang went off. It wasn't a real gunshot, but the sound was still enough to make my heart race. Tear gas canisters were thrown into the crowd. White plumes of smoke billowed out, followed by the choking coughs of hundreds of people. I tried to get out of the crowd, but everyone was doing the same thing. The feeling of being swept away by a stampede was something I'll never forget. My feet barely touched the ground as I was pushed along by the power of the panicked crowd. When I finally broke free, my eyes were stinging and my nose wouldn't stop running. The tear gas burned my skin. But instead of running back to my hotel as my instincts screamed at me, I followed a group of protesters heading toward the Parliament building. Maybe it was the curiosity of a wannabe journalist, or maybe it was just the feeling of witnessing history in the making. The scene at the Parliament building looked like a war zone. Iron fences had been torn down, and barbed wire was pushed aside. Protesters and police faced each other only a few feet apart. There were shouts, the clanging of metal, and the constant explosions of tear gas canisters. Then everything escalated in a terrifying way. I don't know who started the first fire, but flames began to rise from the first-floor windows of the Parliament building. Thick black smoke poured into the sky. The protesters weren't scared by the fire. Instead, they cheered as if they were watching a sports game. The fire spread to the surrounding buildings. Cars and motorcycles were set on fire, creating more columns of black smoke. A nearby gas station caught fire and exploded with a bang that shook the ground. The sound was like thunder in my ears. In the middle of all that chaos, I saw strange moments of human kindness. An old woman shared her bottle of water with people around her who were affected by the tear gas. A young man asked me in English what soccer team I supported, as if we were sitting in a coffee shop instead of a riot. After witnessing the chaotic scenes, I decided it was time to leave. I needed to get back to my motorcycle. I was worried if my bike was still in one piece. In situations like this, theft is common. But when I got there, I was so happy and relieved to see that my baby was still safe and sound. Nothing was stolen. Just then, a group of people approached me. One of them talked to me and explained that the protest was about political change and fighting corruption. Then, another person in the group offered me a bottle of water, but I politely declined because I had just finished my own. This person introduced themselves as being from the Kathmandu hiking group, a club with 32,000 members who often go hiking and organize cleanup campaigns. They were there to give out free water to everyone after the protest. I was incredibly surprised and touched by this kindness. Only in Nepal could you be in the middle of a protest and come back to find your bike still there. After a short conversation, I said goodbye and rode back to my hotel in peace, a complete contrast to the chaos I had just experienced. That night, I lay in my hotel bed, thinking about everything I had seen. In the darkest moments, there were still flashes of kindness. This trip changed my perspective on travel. Before, I always imagined spectacular roads, beautiful photos to share, and memorable experiences. But the reality of travel is not always like that. Sometimes you get thrown into unexpected and violent events that you aren't prepared for. It's in those moments that you truly understand who you are and what the world is really like. When the plane took off from Kathmandu 3 days later, I looked down at the city shrinking below me and thought about home. The familiar streets where I grew up, the peaceful mornings drinking coffee without worrying about tear gas or gunshots. Stability and peace became incredibly precious in my eyes. Nepal taught me how fragile the line between order and chaos is, that there is both an angel and a devil inside every person, and that peace is a gift we often don't appreciate until we see the absence of it. The Texas sun was scorching hot when we arrived at the farm. This was a long-planned vacation for the three of us, me, Michael, and Carlos. We went to a fishing lake in West Texas, far from the noisy city, with only nature around us. Hey, you guys need to be careful. This lake has some special fish, and stay away from the north side. There's a very aggressive beehive over there. A man with a serious look in his eyes watched us, holding a fishing rod. He was probably a regular here. We nodded, but none of us really paid attention. We had cold beers, some snacks, and a cool lake. What could possibly ruin this day? Michael was the most excited. I heard there are some big fish here. We found a spot by the lake, set up our fishing rods, and enjoyed the sun. Michael and Carlos were arguing about which bait was the most effective, while I just wanted to enjoy the peace. I'm going to take a walk, I said to them, standing up and stretching. Don't go too far, Carlos warned me. I waved my hand. Don't worry, I'm just going to walk around a bit. I walked along the lake shore, enjoying the wild scenery. At first I didn't notice, but then the buzzing got louder and closer. I realized I had accidentally walked into the north side, where the beehive was that the man had warned us about. Before I could react, a bee stung my neck. Then another one stung my hand. I screamed and turned around. A black swarm of bees was flying toward me. Michael! Carlos! Help! I yelled and ran toward them. They both jumped up when they saw me and then saw the bees chasing me. The chase began. The three of us ran as fast as we could, waving our hands in the air, yelling at the top of our lungs. "Jump in the lake!" Michael yelled. Without thinking, all three of us jumped into the dark, cool water. "Swim far away from the shore." "Wait for the bees to leave," Carlos shouted. Michael and I did as he said. We swam farther and farther from the shore. We had swum into the deeper water. The frantic buzzing of the bees slowly faded away. We had escaped, but in an instant, I felt a sharp sting in my right leg. "What was that?" I asked, looking down at the water in a panic, but the water was too murky to see anything. Then Michael started screaming. "Something's biting me!" He thrashed violently, splashing water everywhere. I felt a second pain, then a third, on the same leg. It felt like someone was using a knife to cut my skin. "Fish! They're carnivorous fish! Swim to shore! Hurry!" Carlos yelled. Carlos had quickly swum to shore. I tried to swim after him, but each kick was a terrible pain. I heard Michael screaming behind me, but I didn't dare to turn back and look. Survival is the strongest instinct. The water around me started to turn red. I tried to swim faster, but the pain was slowing me down. "Jake, hurry!" Carlos was standing on the shore, waving his hands frantically. I used all my strength to swim to the shore. With each passing second, I felt more fish attacking my leg. It hurt so much that I couldn't scream anymore. Only groans escaped my throat. Finally, my hand touched the mud. Carlos pulled me onto the shore, and I collapsed. Oh my God, my leg. I didn't dare to look down. "Where's Michael?" Carlos asked, looking out at the lake. We couldn't see Michael anywhere. There were only red ripples spreading on the water where he had been. Carlos quickly wrapped his shirt around my leg, trying to stop the bleeding. "Michael didn't make it," Carlos said, shaking his head, tears streaming down his cheeks. I tried to sit up, but the pain almost made me pass out. I looked down at my leg, a sight that would haunt me forever. Most of my right foot was gone. The bones, tendons, and flesh were torn apart, revealing a chaotic mess. The bones of my foot were stark white, and the two remaining toes were dangling by thin strands of flesh. I started to vomit. I called 911. "They're on their way," Carlos said, trembling. I nodded, unable to say anything. The pain was drowning out all my thoughts. I felt cold, even though the Texas sun was still scorching us. The police found Michael's body 2 hours later when the rescue team arrived. I was put in the ambulance and given an IV, but I still insisted on staying until I could see Michael with my own eyes. What was left of Michael was unrecognizable. The fish had eaten most of his face, leaving only empty eye sockets and pieces of his skull. The rest of his body wasn't much better, a skeleton with a few remnants of flesh. Carlos and I were speechless when we saw that scene. After the accident at the lake, the doctors tried, but my foot was too badly infected. They had to amputate my entire foot. I'm learning to walk with a prosthetic leg. Carlos visits me every week. I know he's also struggling with guilt because we made it to shore, but Michael didn't. Every night, I find myself in that lake, the feeling of sharp teeth sinking into my flesh, Michael's screams as he was pulled under. I don't think I'll ever swim again. Even taking a shower makes me panic. Every time I look down at my leg, I see the fish, hundreds of them with their sharp teeth.
This is the terrible story I will tell on Halloween. I'm Jane, 21 years old, working for an auto garage in town. Just like every year, the streets, shops, and homes are filled with Halloween decorations. One morning while walking, I was attracted to a group of people gathering on the sidewalk. When we got closer to see, people were enjoying themselves, taking pictures with a mannequin hanging from a tree. The mannequin was female, wearing a white dress with lots of stains and long, scraggly brown hair, body covered in bruises. The face was pale with a haunting expression, her saucer eyes wide open, mouth wide open with bleeding stains. I and everyone there were amazed at such an uncanny and realistic mannequin. I also enjoy taking photos with the mannequin, then sharing it on social networks to immerse in the Halloween atmosphere. My photo quickly had a large amount of interactions. "Yo, it's really like that girl's hanging right behind you." Reading that comment from a friend, I laughed out loud. One evening, about 3 days later, I was on my way home from work, quite late because the shop was very busy that day. There was a group of people gathering on the street. I slowed down and realized that was the place where the famous mannequin was decorated. It was well known for its realistic details, I thought, until I saw a cop car parked nearby. Out of curiosity, I got out of the car to find out what's going on. Trying to squeeze through the scene before my eyes was so terrifying that I immediately felt nauseous. The mannequin had her flesh torn and skin dangling and was now crawling with maggots, and a terrible stench arose. Its face was also much paler and seemed to be puffing out. "Oh my God, that's a real person, not a Halloween decoration." The people standing around started talking to each other. Immediately I shivered, a cold running down my spine. The police are blocking the scene and asking everyone to disperse to make it easier for the coroners to investigate. I returned home haunted by that woman's appearance. Looking back at the photo, I realized I was taking a photo with a hanging corpse. She was looking at me as if she knew I was looking at her through the phone. The creepy smile was full of blood. The eyes were full of pain and hatred. I was startled and zoomed in on the photo to look closely. That creepy smile has since disappeared. I hastily deleted the photo and tried to do chores around the house to not think about it anymore. But that whole evening, I was constantly haunted by a feeling of uneasiness that I don't know why is there. I went to my room early, trying to relieve my anxiety by playing games. After a while, I decided to go downstairs to get some snacks. As soon as I looked towards the door, I was startled and screamed loudly when I saw the silhouette of a woman wearing a white dress with long flowing hair at the door. "Are you all right?" It turned out to be my mother. My heart skipped a beat. I acted as if nothing happened. I told my mother it was okay, and I went to bed and covered myself with the blanket. I don't remember what time it was when I woke up. The feeling of something touching my hair and nose makes me uncomfortable. As I slowly opened my eyes, I saw a foot hovering right in front of me. I looked up. The hanging woman's body was looking at me with a rotten face and a bloody smile. I was so scared that I couldn't open my mouth or move. Suddenly, the body's head fell right in front of me. That smile and eyes right before my eyes. I jolted from my bed with all my strength, eyes still closed shut, screamed my lungs out. I ran down to the living room. The loud scream woke everyone in my home up. The whole night my parents were with me because I was so panicked. 2 days later, the town news reported on the incident that the decorative mannequin on the street was actually the corpse of a hanged woman. The girl's identity was discovered. Her name was Hannah, 20 years old. She was murdered by her vile, cruel, junkie boyfriend. After that, I was traumatized by girls with long hair wearing white clothes, especially white dresses. One evening, I worked overtime at the garage. At that time, around 11 a.m., a Toyota Camry entered the garage with its warning lights flashing continuously. I ran out to find this situation. Stepping out of the car was a girl with long hair, wearing a white dress that covered most of her legs. She didn't look at me, but was still bending down to get something from the car. I started to feel nervous. I asked her what help she needed. She said there was a problem with her car's brakes, causing her to almost have an accident, and she wanted me to check it for her. She stood up straight and looked at me, the face that I knew too well. She smiled and introduced herself as Hannah. My roommate intends to kill me. I am Baron, living in a small house with 2 bedrooms. I posted an ad looking for someone to share the rent with. Even though I don't want to live with someone else, especially not a stranger. After a week of posting ads for a roommate on various websites, I met Dante, who was the same age as me. Dante moved in with nothing but a single backpack. He was tall, very thin, with an expressionless face and eyes that always carried a constant look of exhaustion. After taking a tour around the house, we discussed some essential details about living together. Everything I brought up, Dante agreed to without a second thought. He had only one issue he wanted to discuss with me up front.
I often sleepwalk. I wonder if that will bother you.
I used to sleepwalk myself and had to undergo treatment for a while. Moreover, we have separate bedrooms, so I comfortably replied, "That's not a big issue for me." Having an additional person living with me wasn't as inconvenient as I had imagined. We didn't have the same schedules, so we didn't run into each other very often. The house also felt less empty. One night, I jolted awake when I heard Dante screaming loudly. I hurried to his room to check on the situation. "Are you okay?" I called out loudly while knocking on the door, trying to drown out Dante's screams. But immediately, he stopped screaming, and everything fell silent again. I tried turning the doorknob. He hadn't locked the door. Looking into the room, he was still asleep, as if nothing had happened. He must have been sleepwalking, I thought, and went back to bed. A few months later, everything went back to normal. I noticed that he didn't have any family or friends. In the several months he's been living here, I haven't seen anyone visit him. He also didn't have any phone calls with anyone. That's what I observed. He also didn't go out for leisure. He only went to the supermarket to buy some essentials and then returned home. One night, Dante screamed loudly again. This time, I ran over, opened his door without calling out first, but as soon as I opened the door, everything felt eerily silent, and he was still sound asleep. In the following days, everything went back to normal. One night, I jolted awake in the middle of the night. In the corner of the room, a tall, thin figure stood staring at me with lifeless eyes. I sat up, screamed loudly, and quickly turned on the light. "Dante!" I exclaimed in an irritated tone. "What are you doing in my room?" He didn't answer, standing still like a statue. I walked over and gave him a firm pat on the shoulder. Dante woke up, and after realizing what was happening, he repeatedly apologized and went back to his room. I couldn't go back to sleep. The image of Dante in the darkness kept playing tricks on my mind. Wait a minute, I clearly locked my door. Realizing this anomaly, I raised a big question about him and started to be more cautious. In the following nights, I couldn't sleep well. I had trouble falling asleep, kept waking up suddenly, and felt as though I was being watched. One night, I finally fell asleep around 2 a.m. Not long after, I jolted awake when I heard a noise that sounded like a door closing. I sat up, turned on the light, and looked around the room, but didn't see anything unusual. I walked over to the door, placing my hand on it with suspicion, and my heart was pounding. I turned the doorknob and was shocked to find that the door wasn't locked. But I swear I checked the lock at least 3 times before going to bed. Looking at Dante's room across the hall, a sense of tension and exhaustion overwhelmed me. I felt regretful for having found a roommate. I needed to have a clear conversation with him to find a solution. The next day, I left the house feeling extremely exhausted. The mountain of work that needed to be done left me drained. Returning home at 6 p.m., I collapsed into bed and fell asleep immediately. The screams rang out again, but it was very close, very loud, with a tone of pain and anger. I thought if I kept being pushed into such a state of panic and fear, my heart would eventually explode. I fumbled around, unable to find the light switch. Panicking and extremely scared, I also screamed loudly, joining in with the screams. Finally, the light was turned on. It was Dante, standing right behind my bed, hands holding the knife. His face was fierce, with his eyes rolling wild, his mouth agape. All came down upon a scream. I stood on the bed, huddled into the corner of the room, my heart racing as if it might stop. He suddenly collapsed, kneeling on the floor with his head bowed, still holding tightly onto a knife. Minutes passed, and I didn't see any further reaction from him. I grabbed my phone, hurriedly fled the room, went to the garage and drove away. After driving a good distance away from the house, I checked the clock and saw it was after 3 a.m. I decided to sleep in the car and parked in the local church's parking lot. At 8 a.m., I drove back home. I guessed that Dante would be awake and that I would need to talk to him. But Dante was gone. He had moved out during the night. I called him, but couldn't get in touch. 2 months later, my lease ended. While cleaning up the house, I discovered a box in Dante's room. Inside there were many photographs of me sleeping, each one clearly dated. A key. I used it and opened my bedroom door. Sleepwalking might be causing Dante to behave in this disturbing way. Because he woke up in time that night, Dante stopped before he could harm me. Feeling guilty and embarrassed, he left. It's also possible that sleepwalking is just an excuse for him to carry out some evil intentions. Afraid that I would call the police, Dante quickly escaped and left behind this box. Regardless of the situation, I thank God that I am still safe. I have moved to another state, but what happened with Dante still haunts me every night. The secret behind Dante's actions remains a frightening mystery that I do not want to explore further.
What once seemed like a perfect decision turned into the worst nightmare. The house by the lake was our dream, but now, every night, I hear Devlin's voice calling from the cold water. I'm Oscar, 37 years old. My wife is Xavier, who was my junior in college. We have a 6-year-old son named Devlin. My wife and I are in the real estate business. Specifically, we buy old houses for cheap, then renovate them and resell them for a profit. The business provides my wife and me with a stable income. 2 months ago, we bought a very spacious house on the edge of town that even had a swimming pool in the front yard. What made it even better was the low price, and my wife and I were thrilled we had found such a great deal. After inspecting the house and estimating the cost and time for repairs, I suggested to my wife that we should move here. Once renovated, the house would be an ideal place to live. Devlin also needed a stable and spacious environment to grow up in. Xavier was completely convinced and agreed. After the renovations were completed, my family moved into the new house. Unlike my wife's and my excitement, Devlin seemed shy and uncomfortable with the new house. Xavier and I thought he just needed time to get used to the new place. Devlin's room and our room were on the second floor, separated by a staircase leading down to the living room. We prioritized cleaning and decorating Devlin's room first to make him feel as comfortable as possible. On the first night in the new house, Devlin said he was scared and wanted his parents to stay until he fell asleep. Our family of 3 lay on Devlin's small bed and read a fairy tale book. A while later, seeing that Devlin was fast asleep, we went back to our room. In the middle of the night, our son's screams woke us up. My wife quickly ran to Devlin's room and hugged him tightly to reassure him. I waited for him to calm down and asked him what was wrong. Devlin said a monster with big feet had been standing and looking at him. We realized Devlin had a nightmare. Xavier told me to go back to our bedroom and that she would stay with him. Devlin's mood got worse over the next few days. He was always scared and said he kept hearing a voice whispering in his ear. We were quite worried about our son's health, so we hired a psychologist to come to the house. We waited in the living room while Devlin talked to the doctor upstairs in his room. About an hour later, the psychologist came downstairs and said Devlin had an anxiety disorder. She told us we needed to pay more attention to him and talk to him more. But contrary to what the psychologist said, Devlin's behavior became increasingly abnormal. At times, he was timid and shy, and at other times, he was aggressive and easily angered. One morning, while I was with some construction workers retiling the living room floor, I was startled by Xavier's yelling from outside in the yard. When I ran out, I saw Xavier and Devlin getting out of the car. Xavier was very upset, uttering words of blame, while Devlin looked sad with his head down. I was confused and asked what had happened to them. Xavier said Devlin had been suspended from school for a few days due to his rebellious behavior and for hitting his classmates. I told Xavier to calm down and to leave us alone so I could talk to our son. She angrily said she would invite the same psychologist back to talk to our son again. She's dead. Devlin's words froze my wife and me in place. I knelt down, looked Devlin straight in the eyes, and gently asked him where he got that information. Devlin said the mysterious voice told him that. Xavier quickly called the female doctor, but the person who answered the phone was her mother. She told us that her daughter had been in a car accident for reasons that were unclear. The day of the accident was the day after she spoke with Devlin. We were incredibly confused about everything and decided we had to pay more attention to Devlin. On the days he was not in school, Devlin just stayed in his room and painted. My wife and I spent time talking and listening to Devlin to understand his state of mind. I also reduced my work hours to take our son out to play. The most important thing to us now was our son. Xavier and I didn't want to make any mistakes in raising Devlin, and we didn't want to miss any of his developmental milestones. One night, I woke up to a very loud noise from the swimming pool. I quickly went to check, with Xavier anxiously following behind. When we got there, I was stunned to see Devlin's small body floating on the surface of the pool. Xavier screamed as soon as she saw the heartbreaking scene. Everything seemed to collapse. We couldn't believe we had lost Devlin forever. The incident happened so quickly that Xavier couldn't recover. She blamed me for not prioritizing installing a protective fence around the pool. I also reached my breaking point and said some harsh things to my wife. Xavier immediately packed her things and left. I didn't hold on to her or even look after her for a second. I stayed in this house full of grief alone, and I chose to work to temporarily forget everything. I sleep in Devlin's room because I miss my son so much. Many nights I hear Devlin's screams for help. I wake up, hug my son's small pillow, and cry. I blame myself for indirectly causing Devlin's death. Sometimes, in our busy lives, we forget that the most important things are right in front of us. A child needs to be cared for, not only with material things, but also with our time, our listening, and especially their safety. Protective measures may seem as simple as a pool fence, but the smallest oversight can lead to a lifetime of regret. Take the time to truly be with your children, listen to their fears, and never compromise a child's safety for any reason. My name's Devlin, and this story goes back to a stormy night 22 years ago, when I was just 13. We lived in this old 2-story wooden house way out on the edge of Jacksonville. Right behind it was this thick forest where I'd spend pretty much every summer day playing. I used to love that forest, until that night. The wind was going crazy, howling like some wild animal, slamming branches against the windows, and the rain was coming down in sheets. We were all in the living room, glued to the news. They were talking about major flooding and blackouts all over the place. "We should grab some candles and flashlights," Mom said, her voice blurred over the noise of the rain. She looked out the window and asked, "John, do you think the power's gonna go out?" Dad rested his hand on her shoulder and said, "Maybe, but don't stress about it." Before he could even finish the sentence, everything went pitch black. "I'll check the fuse box." "Devlin, go get the flashlight from the kitchen drawer for me." I stumbled around in the dark, grabbed the flashlight, and followed Dad out the back door. The second I stepped outside, I shivered. The wind was blowing through the trees and sounded like some kind of weird creature crying out. While Dad messed with the fuse box, I turned to look at the woods. The flashlight wasn't strong enough to cut through the rain, but I could still make out the shadows of the trees swaying like crazy in the wind. Then, out of nowhere, this cold chill ran down my spine. I heard something weird coming from the woods. I pointed the light that way and saw it. A pale, skinny arm reaching out from behind a big tree trunk. I just stood there, frozen, thinking no way I was actually seeing that. A few seconds passed, then I turned, dropped the flashlight, and bolted back into the house, not even stopping when I heard Dad calling after me. "Devlin!" "What's wrong?" Dad rushed in behind me, face all scrunched up with worry. I was shaking, not from the cold, but from pure fear. "There's someone in the woods." I saw an arm. Mom and my sister Amy were sitting on the couch, both staring at me, totally confused. "Are you sure?" "It could just be the shadow of a tree. Things look different in a storm," Dad said, trying to sound calm. "No, I saw it," I said again, but my voice was all shaky, and it didn't sound very convincing. "Okay, I'll go check. It could be someone lost in the storm. Mary, keep the kids in the house. Lock the door." Mom begged him not to go out and told him to call the cops instead. "In a storm like this, they'll take hours. Just look around," Dad insisted. I wanted to stop him, but I was too scared to say anything. He stepped outside and vanished into the rain. Mom locked the door and pulled us in close. 5 minutes went by, then 10. I couldn't sit still. "I'll go find Dad," I said, getting up. "Devlin, no, Dad's fine. He knows how to protect himself." I sank back down, eyes glued to the window. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a voice calling from outside. "Devlin!" It was Dad's voice, but it sounded weirdly far away. Without thinking, I ran to the window. "Dad, where are you?" "Mary, Devlin, open the door." That was Dad again, but this time it was coming from the woods. I grabbed the flashlight and made a run for the back door before Mom could stop me. No way I was going to leave Dad out there alone. "Devlin! Come back!" Mom shouted, but I was already outside getting soaked by the rain. I aimed the flashlight at the woods and started yelling for Dad. Then I heard footsteps, but they weren't coming from where Dad's voice had been. The footsteps were coming from a different direction, deeper in the woods. I swung the flashlight that way, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw someone walking toward me. "Devlin? What are you doing here?" I almost dropped to my knees in relief. It was Dad. But wait, how could that be? I just heard him calling from the opposite direction. "I heard you calling from the woods," I said, my voice all shaky. Dad's face tightened. "I didn't call you. I was just checking around the house." A cold chill crept down my spine. If it wasn't Dad, then who the hell was calling me? "Go inside." I spotted someone running into the woods. We ran back toward the house, but the door was locked. "Mary, open the door," Dad yelled. No response. "Mary!" Dad called out louder, and a whole new kind of fear hit me. Then we heard a noise from the front of the house. Someone was messing with the front door. Dad held a finger up to his lips to tell me to stay quiet, and we slowly moved forward. Through the window, we saw Mom looking through the peephole, her face pale as a ghost. She turned, whispered something to Amy, and they both rushed upstairs. "Mary!" Dad knocked on the window, but Mom didn't hear him. The doorknob rattled again, this time harder, more aggressive. Dad grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back door. "Devlin, I'm gonna bang on this door. When I get in, you run straight upstairs to Mom and Amy." I just nodded, too freaked out to say anything. Dad slammed on the door with everything he had. After the third bang, it flew open. We rushed inside, and I bolted straight upstairs. I found Mom and Amy in Mom and Dad's bedroom, both of them shaking. I saw it through the peephole. That's not a normal person, Devlin. That face. I couldn't deal with it. And I got it. I'd seen that face too, out there in the woods. That wasn't a human face. Then we heard Dad's voice downstairs, followed by the sound of glass shattering. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Slow. Mom shoved us into the bathroom and locked the door. Mary? Devlin? Amy? Dad's voice echoed from right outside. We didn't make a sound. Barely breathed. Mary, open the door. It's me. Dad's voice sounded totally normal. Mom pressed her hand over mine and Amy's mouths, telling us to stay quiet. Mary, open the door. Dad's voice was angry now, and the doorknob started rattling hard. Then we heard another voice from downstairs. Mary, Devlin, Amy, where are you? It was Dad's real voice. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, followed by banging on the door, someone yelling. We just clung to each other, frozen, not even twitching. After a while, it all went quiet. Just dead silence. Then came Dad's voice again, soft and worried. Mary, are you in there? John? Is that really you? It's me. Everything's safe. Mom slowly cracked the door open. Dad was standing there, blood running down from a cut on his forehead. What happened? I don't know for sure, Dad said, catching his breath. But it isn't the thief I thought it was. Dad led us downstairs. In the beam of the flashlight, I spotted something weird lying still on the floor. What is it? I asked, my throat tight. Dad pointed the light at it. It looked sort of human, but definitely wasn't. Its skin was super pale, its limbs were way too long, and its face looked all twisted, like it was trying to change into someone else, but couldn't quite get there. It tried to copy my dad's voice, and if Mom hadn't taken a second to really look through the peephole instead of just opening the door, who knows what kind of awful thing could have happened. The next morning, the storm was gone, and so was the monster. All that was left, where it had been, was a shallow puddle of water. No one believed what we said. The cops just chalked it up to fear, said maybe we were seeing things, or the real thief must have slipped away during the night. 12 years have passed, and still, on stormy nights, I wake up sweating from nightmares about that face and that fake version of my dad's voice. I've never told anyone outside my family about what happened. Who would even believe me? But last night, my 12-year-old daughter said she saw a weird figure in the backyard, a figure with arms that were way too long. And the forecast says there's a big storm coming tonight. I've heard that St. Patrick's Night always brings surprises, but no one warned me that sometimes those surprises are nightmares you'll carry with you for the rest of your life. The bright neon green lights from the bars illuminate joyful faces, and laughter echoes through the streets. The air is thick with the smell of alcohol and beer, but that's part of the celebration. I sit alone in a small corner of the bar, holding a beer, trying to enjoy the lively atmosphere. That's when I saw her. The girl entered the bar, her fiery red hair standing out in the crowd. She wore a dark green coat and a short black skirt, her long, slender legs confidently gliding through the space. Her striking green eyes met mine, and she smiled, and I felt drawn to her, like a moth to the light. She walked closer, took her beer, and said in a warm yet provocative voice, "Are you sitting here alone? Tonight is for having fun." I don't remember exactly what we said after that. I just know that the conversation kept going. She told me her name was Erin, a name that fit perfectly with St. Patrick's Day, and she mentioned she had just moved to this town. After a few hours of drinking beer and laughing, she suggested taking a walk to get some fresh air. I hesitated for a moment, but when I looked into her green eyes and saw her radiant smile, I couldn't refuse. We both left the bar and blended into the crowd singing in the streets. The night wind was cold but pleasant, carrying the scent of damp grass and beer spilled on the sidewalk. We walked through the brightly lit streets where people were still celebrating. Then Erin turned into a dark alley. "This is a shortcut," she said, her tone gentle but firm. I hesitated a bit, but I didn't want to seem shy. The alley was narrow. The dim streetlights were not enough to illuminate every hidden corner. On both sides were old walls covered in graffiti, and the wind blew through, creating a chilling screech. When we reached the middle of the alley, I heard footsteps behind us. I turned around, my heart starting to race, but all I saw was darkness. Before I could say anything, a strong punch from behind made me buckle, my head spinning. Two men emerged from the shadows, both wearing black hoodies, their faces obscured. One grabbed me by the collar and pulled hard, while the other rummaged through all the places he thought he could hide valuables. "Don't move or I'll kill you." A deep, threatening voice rang out in his ear. I wanted to resist, but my body was paralyzed with pain and panic. Erin stood there, neither scared nor surprised. She looked at me, her green eyes now cold and sharp, then smiled, a mocking smile I would never forget. "He's nothing special, but still an easy prey," she said, her voice sweet but full of contempt. I tried to scream, but the second punch to the stomach made me double over, my breath hitching. They took my wallet, phone, and even my shoes. One of the two grabbed my hair, pulling my head up. His face emerged in the faint light, bloodshot eyes and a terrifying set of yellowed teeth. "Someone like him can't do anything," Erin continued to mock. They hit me a few more times before leaving, the taste of fish on my lips, my back and arms aching. I lay on the cold ground in the dark alone with fear and humiliation filling me. It took me a long time to gather enough strength to get up, my head spinning and my body aching. I stumbled out of the alley, back onto the brightly lit street. No one paid attention to me. They were still caught up in the songs and laughter. I trudged to the nearest police station and recounted everything that had happened. The officers looked at me with sympathetic eyes, but I could clearly see that they didn't expect to find the attackers. "The girl? Erin?" a police officer asked. "Are you sure that's her real name?" I nodded, but deep down, I knew that name was a lie. That night, when I returned to the apartment, I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was bruised, with one side of my lip torn open. I didn't recognize myself, not just because of the injuries, but because of the confused, fearful look in the mirror. I wondered how I could have been so foolish, trusting a stranger just because of a smile. I described her and the two men, but there were no leads, no suspects arrested. She was like a ghost, appearing and then disappearing, leaving behind an indelible haunting. That St. Patrick's Day, I lost more than just my belongings. I lost my faith in humanity. I realized that in this world, not everyone who smiles is a friend. Sometimes your worst enemy is the one you never suspect. I never thought my life would become a real nightmare. My name is Emma Carter, 25 years old, and I work as a server at a high-end restaurant on the outskirts of Chicago. I've always been cautious, especially with men who may have bad intentions. In the past, I've been harassed a few times, but never to the point where I feared for my life. I have big ambitions in the hospitality industry, and I've built a professional LinkedIn profile to seek better opportunities. Everything started very normally. One day, I received a message on LinkedIn from Richard Holloway, the shift manager at the restaurant where I worked. He was 45 years old, married with 2 children, always polite and courteous. The first message was simply career advice, tips on how to develop professionally in the industry. I didn't think much of it and replied politely. But then, the messages started becoming more personal. "You're really a special girl. I think we could be closer. Would you like a little help in your career?" When I read those words for the first time, I felt uncomfortable. The friendliness turned into something over the top. I replied briefly, trying to keep a clear distance. But Richard didn't stop. The messages from him came more frequently, often late at night. "I have a private apartment to relax after work. Would you like to come? My wife doesn't understand me the way you do." A feeling of disgust surged within me. I didn't reply. The encounters at the restaurant became tense every time Richard stared at me with eyes full of hidden meaning. I tried to avoid him, but I couldn't leave this job. Then one day, when I opened the locker in the employee changing room, I froze. A bouquet of bright red roses was neatly placed inside, with no name. Only a small card with scribbled handwriting. "For you." Unable to bear it anymore, I decided to block Richard on LinkedIn. But the next morning, I received a friend request from a new account. When I opened it, a message chilled me to the bone. "Do you think you can escape from me so easily? I know you still read my messages. I'm always watching you." Fear began to consume my mind. The feeling of being watched grew stronger and stronger. When leaving the restaurant after my shift, I always felt like someone was standing a few steps behind me. One night, I heard footsteps behind me. I walked faster, and the footsteps quickened as well. I ran. When I reached my apartment, I quickly locked the door, my heart pounding, my mind spinning with panic. I couldn't sleep for several nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I had the feeling that someone was standing right next to my bed. I would wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, my heart racing, cold sweat dripping down my face, only to realize that the room was completely empty. But I couldn't convince myself that I was safe. The next morning, I arrived at the restaurant in a state of extreme stress. But what awaited me was even worse. On my desk, right in front of me, was a photo of me on my way home with the words, "I was here." I panicked. I called the police, but they couldn't do anything without concrete evidence. I only received advice to be more careful. Their helplessness only made me more desperate. One time, I confided in Lucas, a close coworker, about being followed. Lucas knew a bit about IT, so I asked him to investigate the LinkedIn account that had been bothering me. Tracing the IP address, Lucas discovered it didn't come from Richard. A cold shiver ran down my spine. If it wasn't Richard, then who was it? I was hoping for some comfort, but Lucas just chuckled and said, "Well, if I were you, I'd make him disappear." I laughed, thinking it was just a joke. That night, I received another video from the fake LinkedIn account. I hesitated for a few seconds, a sense of unease creeping over me. I knew I shouldn't open it, but curiosity mixed with fear made me unable to resist. I opened it, and my heart seemed to stop. In the video, Richard was tied to a wooden chair, his face bruised. A voice echoed from the darkness. "He was following you, but now he's mine." I jumped, dropping the phone onto the bed, struggling to breathe, but the air around me felt suffocating. A chilling sensation crawled up my spine, as though someone was standing right behind me, whispering in my ear. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone to call the police, but every search effort came up empty. The next day, the restaurant received news. Richard had mysteriously disappeared. Then, I received another message. "He made you uncomfortable, didn't he? I've helped you." I mustered the courage to reply, "Who are you? What do you want?" There was no specific answer, just another video. In the video, I saw myself leaving the restroom at the restaurant. A hidden camera recorded a man hiding behind a locker right after me. The final message almost made me drop the phone. "He's not the only one following you." The police traced the IP address and found an abandoned house. When they broke in, a foul odor hit them as soon as they entered. Deeper inside, they found a dark room with a flickering overhead light, casting a cold glow on a body tied to a chair in the middle of the room. Inside the secret room, the police found dozens of photos of me taped to the walls, taken from different angles. My daily schedule was carefully recorded, hour by hour. A computer contained hundreds of fake LinkedIn accounts. The police recovered data and found fake conversations, including threatening messages to me. Some older photos of other women were also found. The police began to question, was I the only victim he had been obsessed with? Fingerprints found at the scene were matched, and the result left me speechless. All of them belonged to Lucas. When confessing his motive, Lucas said that he had been in love with me, but I only saw him as a friend. When he saw Richard flirting with me, he planned everything, created fake accounts, sent threatening messages, making me believe that Richard was the only dangerous one. But in reality, he was the true monster. As he was led away in handcuffs, Lucas looked at me with a crazed smile. I've gotten rid of him, Emma. Now no one will hurt you. My whole body trembled uncontrollably. I knew I could never escape the darkness he had spread.
My name's Gina. I'm 18 years old. I'm the only daughter and a treasure of my parents. My family's residing in the busy city of San Antonio, Texas. Even though I was born and raised here in San Antonio, my heart truly belongs to my grandparents' home in Modesto, California, and it had always been ever since I came there to visit them. I love the fresh air of that place, so at every long school break, I always asked my parents for a chance to visit my gramps. The elders were delighted every time I came to their door. They typically took me around the almond garden, where I could really enjoy the peaceful atmosphere that the big cities could never give me. Old-fashioned as they were, my gramps didn't watch TV, but they listened to the radio instead. I was a fan of my grandma's little radio. Also, my gramps had a loyal shepherd named Max, who's their best friend. Max was a really smart dog for its type. Every afternoon I often grabbed my grandma's radio and jogged along the backyard hills with Max. I would then listen to music, have a snacking picnic with Max until the gramps called out for dinner. Those happy times I wished would last forever. But everything changed 3 years ago. My family had just returned after a long flight from our vacation with our grandparents in Modesto to San Antonio. 3 days later, my dad received a phone call saying that my grandma had passed away from an accident in the almond garden. That evening after school, I saw my dad and mom had prepared a huge luggage. Sadness lingered in their eyes. I didn't know what's up, and sensing my confusion, my dad told me what happened to Grandma. I didn't cry at all, and in hindsight, I wasn't sure what I was thinking back then, but I had almost no emotion at all. I dragged my suitcase out and literally just went out of the house. I just want to get to Modesto as quickly as possible to confirm everything. My grandma was just fine. She would be thrilled to see us coming back. On our way back to Modesto, I felt really uneasy for the entire trip. I didn't answer any questions from my parents, but just stared at the windows. My thought was all about my grandma. We arrived and present at our grandparents' house the next day. As soon as the ride stopped, I rushed into the familiar house. I yelled aloud, but the familiar sight of my grandma, granddad, and Max were no more. The house was unusually quiet and gloomy. Max barked very loud, and when I came closer, I noticed that he's chained. Never before did my grandparents chain him, and thinking he's in a lot of stress, I released him away. He immediately came rushing inside. My parents also rushed in. The once beautiful and tidy house was now so empty without my grandma. Everything was messy. Even my grandma's favorite vase was broken as well. My grandpa sat motionless in the bed, right next to my grandma, and pale, lying motionless, bandage all over her forehead. No longer lingered on the thin thread. I was now completely collapsed. All I could do at that was cry. My parents also shared in my grief. I didn't remember for how long I had been kneeling down like that, but I did remember that Max barking snapped me out of my trance. Max had never done this before. He stared at my grandpa as if he's an enemy. My grandpa angrily looked at Max. He kept mumbling something.
and without any words, he picked up his pistol in the locker and shot his dog in the head. Everything happened so fast that Max could only let out a weak whimper before completely ceasing any motions. Me and my parents were all stunned looking at that carnage. What the hell was going on here? What happened to my grandpa? I seemed to have lost every bit of sanity in me, and therefore I couldn't shed any tears anymore. My mom said it's due to the extreme grief that my grandpa had acted irrationally like so. My parents suggested a local funeral in the local church. It was also Grandma's favorite destination when she was alive. However, Grandpa insisted not. He only allowed his wife to rest in the place two of them had resided for 30 years. For 2 days, I remained close next to Grandma's coffin and ate and slept very little. My dad had also picked up a good place to rest Max, next to her. I did not see my grandpa wept or showed any kind of grief. He chose silence, just staring into Grandma's picture. It would be a closed casket funeral, he demanded. Every visitor could only view her coffin from afar, he requested. Even for my parents, my grandpa demanded for them to stay away. We did not dare argue with those irrational demands. After all, he was the one that was supposedly in the deepest grief. In the evening when I was next to my grandma's and Max's coffin, I opened up her favorite radio. Suddenly, the radio digital display showed up. "Hello, Gina." When I was dumbfounded with the device, suddenly her singing voice rang over. This was her favorite song, which she used as my lullaby when I was a kid. She must have recorded this song to the radio, I thought. Hearing her voice again, the surge of emotion came back, and I couldn't hold off my tears. When the song was halfway through, a strong hand grabbed on the radio and snatched it from me. It was Grandpa, who mercilessly smashed the radio on the ground and broke it in pieces. I couldn't hold back my emotions anymore, and that was the first time I snapped at my grandpa, yelling to his face. My parents immediately jumped in to intervene, and my mom dragged me to the bedroom. She told me to wash myself up. It would calm me down. The family had enough problems already. I groggily dragged myself to the bathroom, and when I looked in the mirror, I could see my sanity hanging on by a thread. My grandma suddenly appeared in the mirror, where she smiled at me and whispered something. I believed from her mouthing that she was calling for my name. Suddenly on her forehead there was a hole, and from that hole, blood kept oozing out. She kept smiling, even though the blood had covered her entire face and mouth. When I turned my back around, she was gone. But I did spot something on the ground that looked like a spent cartridge case. A cartridge case, and the hole in my grandma's head. Things seemed to link in with each other. It prompted me to spring to action. I dropped the casing in my chest pocket and made my way down to Grandma's coffin. I had to see it. So I pushed open the casket and tried to look at my grandma's obscured bandaged head, when suddenly a strong hand grabbed my arm tight to the point of it being very painful. I had to bite my lips to not yell aloud. It was my grandpa. He was very close there, staring at me with bloodshot eyes and gritting teeth. I feel like he's someone else completely. The grandpa I knew and loved was no longer there. I swiftly snatched my hands away and turned back to my room. I remember to carefully hide away the cartridge case and my grandma's radio. After the funeral, my family must return quickly because we have many things to do back in San Antonio. On the day we went back, I didn't see my grandpa as my grandpa anymore. His changes scared me. 3 weeks later, I received the radio back from the repair. I nervously turned it on when waiting for my grandma's warm voice. I bursted into tears. I really missed her.
What are you doing? Stop it! Are you out of your goddamn mind? Help! Somebody help!
That was all I heard by the end of the recording. For 3 years, I hid the truth from my parents. I tucked within me the haunting last moment that completely changed my loving grandpa. Now he's much weaker, and he's losing the fight against stomach cancer. Should I tell everyone the things I know and dig more into my grandma's death?